Oregon football continues pushing into the state of Arizona in the 2024 recruiting class, and I'm going to share some of my stories from my recent trip to Arizona on today's episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How's everybody living? Hope everyone's having an awesome day. It is Tuesday, May 30th, 2023. And thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks over on Fan Nation, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. Before we get into today's episode, kindly ask you guys to hit that like and subscribe button. It only takes a second out of your day. It's free, and it is a tremendous way to support what I'm doing, covering Oregon football, the football team, and on the recruiting trail as well. You know how I get down. If you're looking for Oregon football recruiting, I am your guy, especially when it comes to the podcasting side of things. So on today's episode, we're going to be talking about my recent trip out to Arizona. Got to see a ton of recruits in the 2024 classes and beyond, the 2024 class and beyond. So I'm going to get into some of the guys that I was actually able to see and interview, speak with in person, as well as some of Oregon's biggest targets in the state of Arizona in the 2024 recruiting class. So plenty to get into on today's episode. When you think about Arizona and Oregon's 2024 recruiting class, I think there's one name that absolutely comes to mind right off the bat. That is Luke Moga, or one of Oregon's quarterback commits from Phoenix, Arizona, Sunny Slope High School. This is a guy who definitely intrigued me kind of right off the bat from a recruiting standpoint. I think what was interesting with Luke is that, that I got to learn when I went there is that he was a relative unknown prior to the junior season he had in 2022, had one FBS offer from Central Michigan. And then, Oregon was one of those schools that pulled the trigger, and then all these offers come in. He commits to the Ducks with right around 25 reported scholarship offers. So certainly caught the eyes of colleges across the country. And I think you kind of know the story when it comes to Luke, right? He's relatively new to the position, didn't start playing tackle football until he was a freshman in high school. So obviously there's some work to do. There's room for improvement. But all that to say, this is an incredibly gifted athlete, a guy who can improvise, obviously has tremendous athleticism and really, really fast. He ran a 10.49, I want to say it was, in the Arizona 100-meter state championships with track. So he can definitely get it done with his legs. I remember I was talking to him and kind of how he got into track, and he was saying, well, I didn't really like it at first because I was running just to run, rather than, running away from guys to score touchdowns. But obviously it's paid off a tremendous amount for Moga, who is now committed to Oregon and really kind of just set the Arizona scene on fire at Sunny Slope. So I think some other, parts of his game that stand out to me are the arm talent that he has. I think he has, a really lively arm. Ball comes out of his hand pretty fast, and, definitely is able to throw off platform, on the run. Quick releases, can kind of make all the throws that you need, short, intermediate, deep ball, even deep ball into tight windows. He's had a couple of highlights here if you're watching along on YouTube, where he's kind of just dropped it in over the shoulder for his teammates. Really just precise throwing. And I think that he's a guy that I am super, super excited about in this Oregon 2024 recruiting class. And I think one of the other things that was really interesting that I wanted to share from, my time getting to know Luke a little bit better and then getting to know kind of the people around him. I got to talk to his coach, Coach Jacobs over at Sunny Slope, who was really, really insightful. One of the things that stood out to me was that he talked about how Luke kind of got his name and got his game out there. Because like I talked about earlier, he was kind of a relative unknown, but he talked to me about how Luke was really good at selling himself and putting himself out there, how he was going on social media every week and posting his highlights and, showing coaches what he was doing in these games. And he said, it doesn't matter how many coaches you tag if your film isn't good. And obviously Luke's film was really impressive. I think it was 2,800 yards, 31 touchdowns as a junior. So I thought that was a really interesting aspect and kind of wrinkle in Luke's recruitment. The fact that he drove so much of it himself. And then I also got to learn about, kind of what the recruiting process was like for him. Definitely a lot to handle for any family. I got to hear that, he went on a trip with his mom to Arizona State when his dad was out of town, and he and his mom were really liking Arizona State. Obviously, Kenny Dillingham is now at Arizona State. So Arizona State, long story short, they made a pretty serious push in this recruitment. We know how Kenny Dillingham is prioritizing the in-state guys, but that was one of the finalists that Oregon had to beat out in order to get this commitment. And it really came down to his relationship with Will Stein, how hard Oregon was recruiting him, and just showing them that they wanted him to be the guy. And I think that his skill set is really tailor made for the direction that college football is going. And I got to hear about how the Bo Nix comparison was a big selling point in his recruitment. Is Luke Moga Oregon's next Bo Nix? Who knows? He very well could be. I think you see the similarities there in their play styles. Moga and Nix are both phenomenal runners. Obviously, Nix is a much more polished passer of the two. But this is a guy that I'm super, super excited about. I think another thing that kind of stands out for me is, when I got to go to the practice at Sunny Slope in Arizona, super, super hot. That was obviously a given throughout the entire trip. But, I think I handled the heat a little bit better than I expected. I'm happy happy to report back. But the story with Luke Moga and then the Sunny Slope team, and I don't mean this in a slight at all, but Moga is the guy on that Sunny Slope team. I was kind of asking around about some of the other guys, and I was told, FCS upside for a majority of these guys. So, this Sunny Slope team is more or less going to go as far as Moga can take them in 23. And I loved the way he carried himself when I was watching the practices. Guys were going from drill to drill, and, he was like trying to get their energy, get them to go on a hop, go around the drill, do things the right way. He's such a vocal leader, and he's such a guy that has a really good head on his shoulders. And I think that's probably that maturity is something that you don't always see, in a lot of high school recruits. So I think that Oregon definitely got a good one, got a great young man, great leader, a gamer. He's willing to, with the way he runs and how often he runs, you can tell that he's willing to put his body on the line for his team. Definitely a little dangerous and scary when you're talking about the quarterback spot, the most important guy on your team. But I'm sure that that's gonna, get refined as his career unfolds. His coach was telling me that he hasn't even come close to scratching his ceiling, that the game is just gonna slow down for him every year he plays. So that transition to the college level and just how he, processes the game, like we've talked about, like with Ty Thompson, another Arizona quarterback, that's going to play a role in how early he is actually able to see the field. Because we all know Bo Nix is entering his last year of college football in 2023. A little bit more on Moga. He has since scheduled his Oregon official visit for June 16th through 18th. And I think that this is really important because Michael Van Buren, Oregon's other quarterback commit, is coming for the big June 23rd official visit weekend that the Ducks are hosting. So Oregon has a unique opportunity here in the 24 class because they have two quarterbacks committed. Now you have those guys coming on different weekends, and they're able to, be their own peer recruiters in each of those weekends. So they're kind of both the faces of this 2024 Oregon recruiting class, seeing that they play quarterback, and you're able to sprinkle them, throughout the month, if you will, to have them on campus. And, we know so often that commits are the best recruiters, or current players are the best recruiters. So I thought that was a note that was worth passing along already. And I think, kind of just the last thing here is that Will Stein's been on this job for less than a year, and he's already gotten 3 quarterback commitments in the short amount of time that he has been at Oregon. You got Austin Novosad, who he flipped from Baylor during his first week on the job. You got Moga, and then you also have Michael Van Buren, who is one of the newest commitments for Oregon here in the 2024 recruiting class. Next guy I want to talk about from my Chronicles in Arizona episode, from my travels in Arizona, is Miles Lockhart, a 2024 cornerback from Basha High School in Chandler, Arizona. You'll remember, if that name, that school sounds familiar, it's because it's where the Ducks found 2023 cornerback signee Cole Martin. He was teammates with Miles Lockhart at Basha. They just won an Open Division state title in 2022. And Lockhart and Martin both played a big role in that. I even learned that Cole Martin moved to safety during their playoff run, during the season, to just kind of help out the team any way that he could. Basha also beat Los Alamitos, which had a pair of 5-stars on that roster last year, in Malachi Nelson and Makai Lemon, quarterback and wide receiver, respectively. So they played some pretty big games. And you see with Miles that he's a guy that has the juice. I think he has a lot of explosiveness, great ball skills, can tackle, isn't afraid of the smoke in open space when it comes to just being a really physical guy. Great kid too. Gotten to interview him a number of times, and it's kind of hard to describe, but I think it makes a lot of sense. When you get to interview these guys in person, I feel like the dynamic is just so much different, and he has such a great energy about him that I think he's going to be a tremendous asset at any program that he ends up picking. So why am I talking about him? Obviously, because Oregon is in the mix here. Looks like Miles Lockhart is focused on 4 schools right now in his recruitment. You got Oregon, Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Texas A&M. Texas A&M is the newest school to enter the mix with an offer to Miles Lockhart earlier this month. And that's kind of what his official visit schedule is shaping up to be. He's going to be at Ohio State June 23rd. He's going to be at Wisconsin June 15th. And then he still needs to set up the Oregon and Texas A&M dates. So the Ducks might have a unique leg up in this recruitment, because of his relationship with Cole Martin. He was telling me that Demetrius Martin is like an uncle to him. So they're really, really close. He has been, an Ohio State lean for a long time, but I asked him that question when I spoke with him, saying, hey, is Ohio State still your leader? And he was saying that, all 4 schools are pretty much even right now for Miles Lockhart. But I asked his coach Chris McDonald, the first time I kind of was getting to know Miles a little bit better, and was asking for the lowdown on him. And he was saying he's like Cole Martin, just a year younger. So, a crazy athletic guy, a versatile dude who can kind of move around in the secondary, I think, if needed. Played some running back for Basha. So I think that there's definitely a lot to like about Miles Lockhart's game. One of the top players in the state of Arizona, a state that the Ducks have really prioritized, especially since Dan Lanning got on staff with Cole Martin in the 23 class. Then you have Michael Gardner, Amari Washington. Amari Washington plays for Chandler, which is another school I got to see at a showcase when I was out there in Arizona. So I think with Miles Lockhart, this is a guy that I think Oregon definitely has a realistic shot with in his recruitment as he works towards a commitment date. I think it's July 7th. And I know it's early July, but this recruitment's going to wind down pretty soon here. And I think that that's a perfect segue to Oregon's kind of got an interesting numbers game to play right now in the 2024 class, particularly at corner. Ducks already have a commitment from 2024 Baltimore, Maryland, St. Francis Academy cornerback Ife Obadegwu, who's teammates with Michael Van Buren, cross-country commitment. But because the Ducks hit the cornerback spot so hard in 2023, and then you also added a pair of transfers in Kyrie Jackson and Nico Reed from Alabama and Colorado, respectively, I only think Oregon's going to take probably 2 corners in this 24 class. So Demetrius Martin, the rest of that Oregon staff, they got a decision to make. Who is their true and elite priority target at corner that is still uncommitted? You have a number of names. Obviously, Lockhart is one that I think looms large here. You also have Dakota Fields, who comes out of Gardena Serra, former teammates with Roderick Pleasant, who went to Oregon in the 23 class. I think Oregon leads in his recruitment. He's been super high on the Ducks. I like Oregon for Dakota Fields right now. No commitment date set right now, but he's going to be in Eugene for that June 23rd weekend, which is huge for his official visit. And then you also have a more recent guy that the Ducks have offered in Chris Johnson Jr. out of Aledo, Texas. I think that I've seen some rumors that he's going to be on campus for an official visit. You also have Xavier Brown out of Santa Ana Mater Dei. He's working from a top 4, Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, and USC. I've seen some reports that he's going to be taking his official visit to Oregon in July. I think he's looking to wind down his recruitment this summer. Then you also have a number of other guys from across the country. Looking out into the state of Ohio, you got Aaron Scott, who visited this spring, Bryce West, who also visited this spring. And then you also have Selman Bridges out of the state of Texas, and then Mario Buford out of DeSoto, Texas. So there's still so many options here for Oregon at corner. I definitely think that Dakota Fields and Xavier Brown are near or at the top of that list for the Ducks here in the 2024 recruiting class. But they hit the position so hard, it only makes sense that you're going to be a little bit more selective when it comes to who you're ultimately going to accept a commitment from in the 2024 class when it comes to finding that second corner. And they really signed some good pieces in that 23 class, so it's not as big of a priority for the Ducks. And because the numbers are a little bit tighter, you're naturally going to be more selective. So the Ducks already have a great one in the fold in Ife Obadegwu, and then you have so many options that you can choose from. Again, I think Dakota Fields and Xavier Brown are the two biggest names to watch at corner for Oregon. Here in the 24 class, definitely feeling better about Fields right now than I am about Xavier Brown. So that is that. And that's kind of the latest that we're seeing right now at corner for Oregon in the 2024 class. Staying in the state of Arizona, we're going to be looking at a couple more guys. The next one we're going to be looking at is Christian Clark. Christian Clark comes from Phoenix, Arizona, Mountain Point High School. And he's a guy that the Ducks have been recruiting for a while now. Let me get you the rundown on Christian Clark, who comes out of Mountain Point, like I said. Listed on 247 Sports at 6 foot, 195 pounds. 4-star guy on the 247 Sports composite, .9094. Number 278 player nationally, number 22 running back, and the number 3 recruit in the state of Arizona here in the 2024 cycle. So a notable update for Christian Clark is that he is going to be taking his official visit to Oregon next month in June. Just announced on Monday that he is going to be taking his official visit on June 9th to Oregon. And it seems like, there are a number of, big schools that are in the mix here for Christian Clark. He's going to be taking his official visit to Texas June 16th. So a little bit more clarity from the official visit schedule. He's going to be going to Florida State on June 24th. So his schedule is kind of coming into focus right now as, a majority of recruits in the 2024 class head into a really pivotal month of June. Fortunately for the Ducks, they had Christian Clark on campus in April. He's also going to be taking his official visit to Georgia. So some very heavy hitters are in the mix here for Christian Clark. A&M is a school that offered in April, so they're in the mix. He's taken a visit out to Bama before, out to Auburn, been to Arizona State and Georgia. So this is a guy that I think is one of the 4 running back prospects that you really need to keep a close eye on here in 2024 for Carlos Lockhart and the Oregon Ducks. Carlos Lockhart signed a pair of really talented backs in the 23 cycle, and Dante Dowdell out of Picayune, Mississippi, and Jaden Lamar out of Lake Stevens, Washington. Both of those guys already on campus, went through spring ball with the team, so they got that head start that I think most head coaches want in today's college football. And I think that Christian Clark fits the mold for Carlos Lockhart in terms of a physical standpoint. 6 foot, 195, 200 pounds. He's got some really good tape here that we have on the screen. A couple other running backs that you got to know for Oregon. Nate Frazier out of Santa Ana Mater Dei. That's Carlos Lockhart's guy, his main target that I've been harping on, really this entire cycle. And then you have Jason Brown Jr. out of Seattle O'Day. And then you also have Dejon Riggs out of Washington, D.C., St. John's College. Keep an eye out on ducksdigest.com for an update on him. I'm supposed to interview him later today, so I want to see what's going on with him. He's going to be taking his official visit to Oregon in June as well. But Christian Clark is, really one of the best the state has to offer when you're looking at Arizona and offensive names. I think another guy is Khalil Valentine out of Chandler. Definitely doesn't have the same physical stature of Christian Clark, and I don't think that he's necessarily a big target for Carlos Lockhart at running back this cycle, but I think that he's another guy worth mentioning. I got to see him at the showcase, and I liked what I saw from Khalil Valentine as well. He's taken a trip out to Oregon before, so just trying to get you guys, up to speed on kind of the biggest names that you have to know out of the state of Arizona here for Oregon in the 2024 cycle. Wasn't able to make it out to Mountain Point, but just trying to gather more info as much as I can on these guys. And then the biggest name you got to know, really, for Oregon in the 2024 class is Elijah Rushing out of Tucson, Sal Point Catholic. He's a 5-star edge rusher, and he's going to be on campus before too long. He's going to be on campus this week, actually. I think June 2nd is when he is supposed to be taking his official visit to Oregon. Visited Eugene just before the spring game, and I think that you can definitely make the case pretty easily that Oregon leads in this recruitment. They were recruiting him super heavily. He was one of the top guys on Dan Lanning's big board from the moment he got the job at Oregon. He knows that you need to have elite talent in the trenches, difference makers at the point of attack, and Elijah Rushing is absolutely one of those guys. So Elijah Rushing is a big name that you have to know. We know that pass rushers are a big need for Oregon, especially when you look at the guys that they're going to be losing after the 2023 season. Brandon Dorless, possibly Jordan Birch, the transfer from South Carolina, Popo Amavai, Casey Rogers, a lot of really talented pieces that are probably going to be on their way out. And that's why Elijah Rushing becomes that much more of a priority. He already took his first official visit, rather, to UCLA this past weekend. But Oregon's got some big competition in this recruitment. You got schools like Miami, you've got UCLA, who I just mentioned, you've got Notre Dame. They're a big one that's still in the picture for Oregon. A lot of good buzz about Notre Dame and their efforts in this recruitment. I want to say Florida is also in the mix, but I'm trying to pull up his top 12 schools, because I know that that's another thing that we can kind of focus on if we're looking at kind of where things are at with Elijah Rushing here in the big picture in his recruitment. I'm still scrolling, kind of stalling a little bit, just trying to find the top schools that he's going to be working from. He came out to Oregon earlier this spring, like I mentioned, so that's great. He's working from a top 12 that includes Arizona, Notre Dame, Florida, Oregon, Georgia, USC, Miami, Tennessee, Michigan, UCLA, Michigan State, and Washington. So there's no shortage of heavy hitters in Elijah Rushing's recruitment, but I think of all of the high-profile edge rushers that Oregon has been recruiting here in the 2024 class, Elijah Rushing has to be the guy that you're most confident about. For a number of reasons. You look at the frequency of visits, you look at the Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoi factor. That's come up a number of times when I've interviewed Elijah Rushing about kind of what makes Oregon special, what makes them stand out. So many Arizona ties on the roster, on the staff. So just I feel like it's really nothing but positive momentum for Oregon here with Elijah Rushing and his recruitment. You could argue, some people might argue on the surface that it stinks that they couldn't get him out for his spring game visit, but they were able to move that visit up, reschedule it, kind of have him as the guy on campus, and really kind of tailor make that visit to him specifically, personalize it. They hosted his brother on the visit as well. So I think that's the big thing with Oregon of, why you want to feel confident about where things are at with him. The way that he moves for 6'6", 240 pounds, I think that's part of what makes him so special along the line of scrimmage. So these are just guys that Oregon needs. I think that Oregon's defensive line play has been pretty good, but you just need to keep the cupboard stocked and stacked with top tier guys. That's why if you compare a guy like Elijah Rushing with an Aiden Breland, with a Jordan Ross, I think you're setting yourself up for success in a really big way. And then they already have Jackson Jones out of the state of Arizona as well from Yuma Catholic. And then you also have, who was the guy I was looking at? Tioni Gray out of Missouri. He's a defensive lineman committed to Oregon, 6'6", 295, 300 pounds. So Oregon's really laid a strong foundation, across the country, but certainly in the state of Arizona. I wasn't able to make it out to Tucson, unfortunately, on this trip. I mean, the timing also didn't line up. I reached out to Elijah's coach, and they were, already finished with spring ball and kind of into finals. And then, I went to Phoenix, so I was kind of in the Phoenix, Chandler area, or or Gilbert as well. Also made it out to Gilbert, and then Tucson's on the other side of the state, more or less, kind of like a 2-hour drive. I was looking into buses. I was trying to make it happen. The flight offerings out of Tucson were not great. So long story short, wasn't able to make it out to Tucson, unfortunately, but really, really enjoyed my time in Arizona. A very unique football scene. I think, a lot of intriguing guys that, need to get more eyes on them. Definitely a lot different, I think, just than the Southern California scene that I've become used to since I moved here last fall. But it's part of what I really enjoy about the job, and there's no substitute for getting out on the road and seeing these guys in person. It's just kind of what makes the job really, really special. I love the traveling aspect of it. And I like to think that, traveling to see these guys is a unique, offering that I can add to my coverage of Oregon on the recruiting trail, not just being another name on the phone. Love getting on the road and getting to build those relationships and kind of, get a feel for what kind of guys Oregon is bringing to their program. So that's kind of the big picture of it. I got to spend, I think it was 3 days out in Arizona. Like I said, really hot, but all the schools were super accommodating. There was good food at all of them. Got to meet a bunch of college coaches. Some of the staff and helpers, like trainers at these schools. They were walking around offering cold towels or water. So they do a really good job of combating the heat out in Arizona. And then there were some lightning strikes that actually delayed a couple of these showcases, and then some rain. So got to battle the elements a little bit aside from just the heat while I was out there in Arizona. But long story short, really, really interesting trip. Definitely have to get back out to Arizona before too long, especially, who knows, maybe Elijah Rushing is going to end up a Duck. I think that that's a pretty, a pick that I'm relatively confident in right now. I haven't written that pick, but I think that the Ducks are in a great spot with Elijah Rushing. I don't think that Christian Clark is necessarily a major priority of a running back, but he's in that top 4. Ducks probably looking to take 2 backs in this cycle. Numbers are going to be tight, but I think that you could probably confidently say that Bucky Irving or Noah Whittington, maybe even both, are going to head to the NFL after the 2023 season. So you need to keep bringing in more talented ball carriers for Carlos Lockhart and the rest of that staff to work with on offense. But I think that'll do it for today's episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Really appreciate you guys stopping by, taking some time out of your day to talk some Duck football with me, talk some Cruton. Important to lock in with me on social media. I am at Torres Sports on both Instagram and Twitter. Need to beef up that Instagram presence just a bit more, but Twitter, easily the best way to keep in touch with me and my work. And then on YouTube at Oregon Football, Max Torres. Kindly ask for a like and subscribe over there. But I think that'll do it for today's episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Appreciate you guys stopping by, spending some time talking some Ducks with me. Share the show. Share the show is the best way you can support me. But I don't want to ask for too much, so I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.